Hello, everyone. It's your girl, Columbia. How are you? I'm fine. Let's get into it. So, I don't know if anyone is going to come and hang out. I know Rose is going to come by and hang out. But I don't know if Kristi is. If not, that's fine. We can schedule for a different day. I always enjoy hanging out with Kristi. So yeah, let's get into it. So, Feminist Talk Game of Thrones, episode 2. So, while we're waiting for everybody, our topic this week is going to be the men of Game of Thrones and sort of a meta-analysis of men's roles and the roles of our characters in the story. So definitely, Tyrion, Tywin, Jaime, Robb Stark, all the great hits, dead or alive, we're going to talk about them. But while we wait, I am going to do some season 7 predictions. So if you're not caught up or you don't want to hear it, I suggest you go. But since I don't have any viewers anyway, I don't have to worry about it. So let's get into it. First, of course, spoiler alerts for seasons 1 through 6. I'll even include 7 in that for Game of Thrones, the series, and for books, A Game of Thrones through the sample chapters of Winds of Winter, because I have heard those. So let's get into it. So all the information that we really have about Game of Thrones season 7 is through trailers and pictures. And this is the first season I've really seen any of the pictures or anything like that, or the kind of production photos or anything. I tried to stay away from that for most of my Game of Thrones watching, and I think I did a good job. But in interacting with other fans, my boyfriend's a big fan, so people would send me stuff, and the next thing I know, I'm looking at all 60 of the Game of Thrones pre-production photos. So there it is. I don't have the chat on, guys, so you can always hit me up on Twitter. I have my Twitter notifications on. So please, at the LadyColumbia, if you have any questions or want to see me talk about anything specifically. Let's continue. So we're going to do some season 7 predictions, and let's get into it. So Dany, let's start with our girl Dany. We know we love Daenerys Stormborn of the House Targaryen, Queen of the Andals, Rhoynar and the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms and Protector of the Realm. Khaleesi of the Great Grass Sea, Queen and Marine, Zaldrize Daria. So, I'm sorry, I had to go through all that. In terms of what I think Daenerys is going to do this season, obviously from the trailers, we're not going to see much of her sea journey. I thought, we're going to see her go to Volantis and crush the slave trade once and for all. And then, she'll be on her way to Westeros, but that's looking like that's not the case. I think we're not even going to stop in Volantis, even though I thought that Volantis was going to be important to the War for the Dawn. Because Volantis has this large black wall made of obsidian, and I thought, yeah, that's gonna be useful, right? But apparently not. So, I'm drinking a little coffee, guys. So, Dany is going to be in Westeros probably at the opening of the season. She'll be on Dragonstone, and it's clear that we're probably going to see Dany assume the throne at the end of the season, right? Because because there's going to be several battles between one, and I think they're doing 7 episodes. So there's clearly going to be a whole bunch of battles in between there that we're all going to want to see. From the trailers, it's clear, spoiler alert, that she is going to fight at Casterly Rock. As evidenced by the fact that we've seen images of a strange castle we've never seen before. We see her in juxtaposition to Jaime on the battlefield. We see the Dothraki fighting the Lannister soldiers. So I doubt that she's going to go directly to King's Landing. I think that she's going to go to the Rock and fight there first. Clearly, we also see Euron Greyjoy going into the harbor in King's Landing and probably going to lend his support to Cersei on the sea. So we know that there's going to definitely be a battle between Euron's army and Daenerys's army on the water. Right? That's pretty fucking clear. If not directly with Dany's ships, then certainly with the Greyjoy fleet that Yara and Theon have stolen. And mind you guys, I'm going slow because Mama is fucking Mama has to remember all the stuff that's happened, right? Okay. Moving right along, we know that there's going to be a confrontation between Dany and Jon. If she's already on Dragonstone on the first episode, if the first episode is basically her being on Dragonstone, then we will probably see him get there by 2 or 3. The next few episodes are going to be interesting in terms of who knows what, who goes where. I think what's going to be really interesting though is that we saw my favorite character, Melisandre. We saw her at Dragonstone when Daenerys arrives, and so there's going to be something interesting that goes on between those two, I think. If Dany even ever meets Melisandre, I sort of think that this is the last season we're going to see Melisandre. But I'll go into that I think a little later. But it's clear that Dany's going into battle. It's clear that she's going to battle at Casterly Rock. My boyfriend and I, we talked about it, and he said that she was going to assume Aegon's role from the books and invade Storm's End. And I was like, why? You know, who gives a fuck about the Stormlands? Right? The Lannisters are not protecting the Stormlands. They're protecting Casterly Rock. I don't think that the confrontation between her and Cersei is going to be very interesting, to be honest with you. I really don't. I don't think that give me a second, guys. I think I'm gonna go see if I can get the chat up. I don't think that the confrontation between her and Cersei is going to be very interesting, because if the story, if we can assume that the story plays out, hold on. If the story kind of plays out the way that we think it's going to play out, then oh shit, I just had the chat too. If the story plays out the way we sort of think it's going to play out, then she's obviously going to assume the throne. And I don't think that Cersei as a person is going to put up much of a fight. It kind of plays out the way that yeah, I don't think that Cersei is going to I'm going to pop out the chat. Okay. I don't think that Cersei's going to put up a whole hell of a lot of a fight. So my prediction for what happens between Cersei. Hey baby. My prediction, let me continue on. My prediction for what's going to happen between Cersei and Dany is really clear. Like, Dany's going to pull a Rhaenyra Targaryen. If you know about the Dance of the Dragons, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. She's basically going to fly to the top of the Red Castle with fucking Drogon, have him blow up. Got a baby and I lost my baby. Rip open the top of the Red Castle, and fucking Cersei's gonna get eaten by a dragon. That seems pretty logical to me. So, we've got a comment in the chat here. Cersei has more on her side than you think, though. Well, that depends on what you're talking about. Are you talking about support? Are you talking about financial support? Are you talking about political support? Are you talking about military support? Because we don't know how many people are in Cersei or Dany's armies. The estimates for Dany's army has gone anywhere from 60,000 to 100,000. If the Lannisters rebuilt their army from the first season, assuming that they've rebuilt it completely and have exactly as many men, then they have about 60,000 men. Mind you, Dany has tens of thousands of cavalry in the Dothraki. She's got 8,000 unsullied, a few less because they've been killed off. Dany has... Obviously, Dany has dragons. She's got catapults, so she's got siege weapons. She's got ships and good sailors. So I don't know what's, you know, in terms of political support, Dany might not have, she's not entrenched in Westerosi politics, so people don't know who she is necessarily, but certainly at this moment, she's got the support of House Tyrell, the second wealthiest house in Westeros. She's got the political support of the Dornish. She's got, getting all kinds of messages. She's got the political support of the Dornish. I assume that she could probably get Jon's support. That's 3 of 7 kingdoms. She's got Yara's support, if you can count her as a Greyjoy and kind of part of the Greyjoys. She's got Yara's support and her sailor support. She's got and who am I thinking of? And the Riverlands. I would assume that the Riverlands are not for Cersei. Okay. Mitch says, so let me get to your comments here, baby. Hey, I don't know. I'm so used to, hey, babe, I'm so used to calling you by your name. I have to stop myself.
Hey, it's fine. Mike has already done it. Everybody else has done it. I've done it.
Well, then I can call you by your name, baby. Hi, Rose. How are you?
I'm good, Columbia.
Good, good. I'm just answering some chat questions. I don't know if Kristi's going to come by or not. So our topic is going to be the men of Game of Thrones, and kind of a meta-analysis on them and their roles in their society and whatnot. So I'm going to quickly answer some questions, some chat I'm getting over here, and then we're getting into it, baby. And feel free to jump in, you know, anytime and give your opinion. It's a free-for-all up in here. You know how my channel works.
Yeah.
Okay, so Mitch says, Cersei has more on her side than you think. I address that. Mitch goes on to say, I get what you mean, but they have castles, which means none of her army has experienced tackling. Well, the Dothraki are pillagers. I would argue that the Dothraki would have some experience in dealing with some forms of stone buildings. Let's see here. She did have that Siege of Marine, though. Yeah, she did. I mean, yes, she did have it. She did fight the Siege of Marine. You're right, Cersei's fuck. I get mixed up with the books. I thought she had a fight, though. I think Cersei does have a fight. I don't think that Cersei is completely lost, but I think that when you look at all the forms of support that potentially could go to Dany, and mind you, she's not paying the Iron Bank back, which means that Cersei isn't, which means that Dany would naturally have the Iron Bank support. Cersei kind of fucked.
That sounds about correct. I usually don't speculate all that much because, you know, Game of Thrones often can throw us for a loop. I mean, I'm still mad at the first season for taking out Sean Bean.
That's my baby, though.
Why Sean Bean?
Well, because he has to die in everything he's in.
Yeah. Well, wait. I'm trying to think if he actually died in the Game of Oblivion. No, he didn't die, but Patrick Stewart died.
Oh, wow.
Which I'm also mad about. Damn it, Elder Scrolls! Why do you have to kill off actors that I like?
Right? I don't know. So far, nobody that I am deeply in love with is dead. So, I don't feel anyone's pain.
I don't know. I like fell in love with Eddard Stark in like the first season.
Of course you did, baby.
And now I'm like never getting attached to anybody.
Well, I will say this. I have detached, as much as I love Daenerys, I have detached myself from her because I know that, you know, George has said that he wants to ruin our lives. So I'm not too attached to her. The only person I'm super attached to is Melisandre, and I know she's gonna die probably this season.
Yeah. Here's my prediction for the upcoming season of Game of Thrones. Is it 7 or 6? Wait, no, 6 was the one that just passed, so it's 7.
Right.
So my prediction for 7, which, by the way, ahead of time, I'm going to say that this is not a serious prediction at all. It is 100% a joke. Everybody dies because a meteor destroys Westeros. White Walkers are dead. Jon Snow's dead. Daenerys is dead. Tyrion. Actually, you know what? Tyrion's the only one who survives, and he sits on the Iron Throne in a completely empty world with no one to rule over.
I love that. That's gonna be it. That's gonna be it. And he gets to drink wine all day. Our girl Olivia Snarks a Lot, whom I love, has said, "I'm scared for the Hound. When he dies, I won't be okay." I can feel that. I mean, I wasn't the biggest fan of the Hound, but now I'm sort of like, I kind of love him again.
Yeah, it actually, with the Hound, it was actually quite funny to me. Like, they don't present him like in the beginning as like a character that you're going to like sympathize with, but like later on, like his build up, mainly the part where he's like helping out Arya Stark, like that was where I started to like think this is a great character. I mean, I don't love him as much as I did Sean Bean. Why did you kill Sean Bean? And you're gonna hear me bring that up a lot.
Hey, I'll go for hashtag why did you kill Sean Bean?
Well, why Sean Bean of all the people? But yeah, I mean, it was kind of like he became a, and I just was like, yeah, I was all for his mission.
Right?
I was all for his vengeance, his anger, and his like absolute aggravation at the world.
Yeah, you sort of. I didn't. I kind of started to fuck with him, when he was helping out Sansa, trying to school her. Excuse me. I was all for that, and I sort of when they brought him back, I loved he and Arya's relationship. And then when they brought him back, I was like, guys, because 6 felt so condensed to me. I was really pissed off that I felt like we spent a lot of time with the Hound, but
that battle though,
yeah,
the battle of the bastards, that battle though,
right?
Actually, if you look at the tactics, like in real life, it's a completely impractical battle, and like all the combatants suck.
Yeah.
Jon Snow's a poor tactician, great fighter, but a poor tactician. He should not be leading any fucking army. I'm sorry.
No, he's not. He shouldn't be a king, honey.
I don't think he should be a king. I don't think he should be a king either. He's a good fighter. I'm sorry. I'm looking at it a bit more like a realistic, realistic tactics.
Take it in whatever direction you like.
But yeah, I'm kind of looking at it. When you look at the actual tactics, it's kind of a fluke that they managed to do how well they did in the battle, because fuck it. Why the hell am I forgetting the other guy's name? I know it was Jon Snow, the guy who had Bran. Wait, yeah, it was Bran, not Rick. Or wait, no,
it was
Rickon.
Yeah,
Rickon. Sorry, I get those brothers confused a lot. Rickon. Honestly, he just were completely incompetent. And as a pincushion, that battle. That battle sets off all the it sets off all the red lights and tactics in my mind, but all the great, all the green lights of cinema, all the basically it's like, oh, this is definitely a great cinematic scene. It is great drama, great build-up. But like, if you're looking at it from an actual war perspective, these are absolutely terrible tactics, and you've been competent leaders leading the charge.
And I will say, I don't, my boyfriend should be here because he's the tactician of us, right? I'm the politician, he's the tactician. He's my general. But I will say that Jon Snow seemingly had no strategy, right? We clearly see that at the very least, Ramsay had a strategy of, okay, I'm going to draw their troops out and I'm going to encircle them, and then from there, I'm just going to, I'm just going to enclose on them. That's seemingly what's happening. Okay, now if I'm wrong, honey, jump on in. But Jon,
of course, how lucky would you have to be to get that pile of dead bodies just perfectly for it to be like that? I mean, that seems like something you should not rely on if you're trying to encircle someone. We're going to encircle someone, but we're not going to completely surround them. We're just going to hope that a bunch of dead bodies pile up behind them in a specific way so that they're like really difficult to climb over if they want to retreat.
Right.
And Jon Snow, where the fuck were your pikemen? You need to have some pikemen.
Yeah, not only some pikemen, I would where's his cavalry? I mean, we saw a bit of cavalry, but we didn't see him. He didn't have obviously didn't have enough, he didn't have enough soldiers, but certainly he didn't have enough cavalry. He didn't even have any siege weapons that he could improvise with. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Oh, it was absolutely it had to be a fluke of a battle because sure, Ramsay had a strategy, but Ramsay was absolutely incompetent. But then again, also in drama, you're not looking for actual war tactics most of the time. You're looking for the most dramatic scene you can make, and that's like a big green light in cinema. It's like it's kind of like the equivalent of pushing swords against each other. For cinema, that's great. For an actual battle, that would never fucking happen.
Oh,
because,
hell no.
You can manage to just cut right past a sword if you're like locked like that, or you can pull out a dagger and stab somebody. Of course, they'll present that as dastardly, but what that actually is that I'm not going to die. I am not going to die. I intend to survive, and I'm not going to be a moron.
Right. Hi, Kristi.
Hello, dears. How are you guys doing?
Well, how are you?
We were doing. We were doing pretty well until you came along. No, just kidding.
Oh no. Yeah. So what are you guys talking about? How can I really jump into this?
The battle of the bastards between Ramsay and Jon Snow.
There you go.
Well, continue. Let me hear what you guys think.
So, I mean, I was making comparisons between, like, how cinematically it's a good battle, but, like, strategically speaking, just both sides were absolutely incompetent. Because those pikemen, like, Jon Snow's forces should not have even been able to break the front line with those pikemen if those pikemen were even semi-competent at their job. Maybe the giant could get past, but not the majority of Jon Snow's forces. They should have all pretty much died there, considering how they only had sidearms and they didn't. I might be misremembering, but I don't think they had any shields either, which means that those pikemen can just poke at all the people, and they can get a lot of stabs in and kill a lot of people with very minimal effort. But cinematically, it's a good scene. I mean, do you actually expect bodies to pile up that way in a battle? That seems like a weird strategy to rely upon.
I will say that actually happened. That happened during the Civil War, which is, it's kind of odd because it is taken from a completely different time period. It's not like I don't know that happened how many times that happened during medieval skirmishes, but I can certainly say that. That was a problem during the Civil War. There were battles where the bodies would pile so high that you couldn't get past them. So that's actually happened.
But it's not reliable. But I mean, it's not reliable the way in which it happened. It's very hard to predict where bodies will pile. You can't just be like, there's going to be a bunch of bodies that'll for sure pile here, and we're going to use those bodies to encircle them. You're also. It would have been deadlier if they were just surrounded by all the pikemen, which it seemed like they had enough. They could have completely encircled all of Jon Snow's forces, and that would have been end of battle. But
Well,
you know,
and you have to ask-
cinematically, that's not a satisfying finish.
Well, true. Let's sort of segue to the main topic, which is men's roles in Game of Thrones and the men of Game of Thrones. The last time Kristi and I spoke, we talked about women and their roles in the society and sort of what they are supposed to do, what they're allowed to do, and what they do. And I suppose we should start with Jon, as Jon is the premier character, I think the premier male character this season. You and I have talked about kind of Jon as a poor general, but what do you think Jon really is? Who is Jon a king? Should Jon be a king? Should Jon have just gone back to the Night's Watch? Who is, what
I'm going to say that there's a disparity between what I think Jon should do and what I think Jon is going to do. I think Jon most likely is going to end up in some, not necessarily by the end of season 7, but I think he's going to be in line for some kind of kingship, even if it's brief. I imagine he'll have some kind of throne, some kind of power.
Well,
He already does, but I mean, I think that it might get stepped up a couple levels, even if it's for only a little while. Of course, what I think Jon should just stay as one of the best swordsmen in Westeros, as that's like his reputation, is that he's a great swordsman. He is great on the battlefield. He is a great combatant. Poor tactician, but a great combatant, which are completely different skills.
Kristi, what are your thoughts? Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, sweetheart.
Oh, it's actually okay. I spoke a bit impulsively, so I didn't actually have anything to say. Sorry.
That's fine. So I think Jon's role is interesting because as I compare him to other male leads in the series, one thing that stands out for me is the fact that he is, other than Eddard, one of the more, basically like the most honorable person in the series. And one of the ways they represent that was, his virginity and the fact that, he had this vow and it was a real kind of struggle for him, but ultimately he kind of gave into it, and he's been, fairly monogamous. He's not, in contrast to the other male characters, he's very pure. Both in his deeds and his values and in his actions. He always tries to do the right thing, or very often tries to do the right thing. So, he's, in that way, he stands apart from everybody else who's playing the game, because everyone else who plays the game gets pretty down and dirty with it. And Jon does that when he has to, but, like for instance, when he had to go undercover as a wildling and kill his mate or his captain, friend, his life seems to be defined by honor. And so in that way, I'm repeating myself now, he stands above the other characters, and that makes him very unique, and that hasn't yet been broken. So we'll see. And we can kind of just compare him to Robb Stark. He broke his promise. He wasn't honorable. Bran is too young to, well, he's probably getting to the teenage years now in the series, but he's always been a child and kind of out of it. But yeah, if you go down the line, all the other male characters are quite shag happy, except for Varys, of course.
Who wouldn't be shag happy
with that cast of attractive people? Right? Yes. So yeah, that's my association with Jon. How about you, lady?
I feel, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I also feel that Jon, one thing I love about Jon, or I loved about Jon up until a certain moment, was that he represented the common folk, right? The sort of, a person who may be associated with people who are of a higher class, but he is still considered low class and common because of his, illicit birth, if you will.
Because he's not just a bastard, he's a royal bastard, which puts him just a step up of normal bastards, but on the same level as a common citizen.
Right, but no one knows that. We as the audience don't know. Nobody knows that until until season 6. And so what I loved about that was this was a young man who was proving he was breaking the kind of feudal paradigm of you're special because you have special blood, and that makes you better morally, it makes you better physically, it makes you a more fit to rule, or more fit to run a polity. But once Jon became, not just Jon Snow, but Jon, the bastard son of, Rhaegar Targaryen, I think that in some ways broke that for me, that idea that, he was going up against the feudal paradigm and proving that he was just as good, if not a better leader, in that he could be trusted. He was virtuous in a lot of ways, and not just kind of that faux virtue that we like to talk about on the internet, but an actual virtue, actually virtuous, actually trying to save people's lives, actually trying to do what's going to benefit people, as many people as he can possibly benefit, and standing up to a person like Stannis Baratheon. But I still think to a certain extent that Jon's virtue shines through, his being Rhaegar's bastard. He's still a bastard. It doesn't matter that he's Rhaegar's bastard. He could be Aerys's bastard for all it mattered. And I think that aspect of it for me is what captured me the most, was the kind of juxtaposition between who he is versus who everyone else is, and how well they rule and how well they do things versus how well he does things. And now I'm just repeating myself and I'm going crazy. So let's keep it pushing.
Yeah. I think that, the role of status is obviously a huge factor. We talked about it with women. Women's status, of course, was far more restricted, right? They're basically indoors.
Right.
They don't have a lot of external roles. They play behind the scenes diplomats. They can work with relationships or maybe sexual power or family relationships, but they're not autonomous agents generally, except maybe in like religious areas with Melisandre. But Jon is very much trapped in that sort of, again, that gives him parallels with Tyrion, in the fact that there are outsiders who are meant to be insiders, but they're still looking in because of something that was completely beyond their control.
Right.
Yeah. So status and your place in male society isn't, guaranteed just because you're born with male genitals. Just like in every other society, there are also intersectional things happening that are, that intersect, as we would say, with sex to help determine people's status and social location.
Oh yeah. And what I find so interesting about Jon in particular is that he's kind of always thrust into these roles of leadership. And, when he first tries to seek it out, when he's with like Qhorin Halfhand, Qhorin just really slaps him upside the face and is like, listen, you think but you've got that good book learning. You don't know what winter's really like. You don't understand the situation that you're actually in. And I in some ways that kind of echoes for me. Jon understands everything very viscerally, and he can understand the game well, but, and I'm taking this in a completely different direction because I haven't had enough coffee, but he for example, him not understanding the game very well. So that moment where, they call him out to his death, and Ollie says, we found your Uncle Ben, we found somebody who's talked about your Uncle Ben, said he was First Ranger. Instead of saying, okay, bring him here to me to my office so I can talk to him, he just runs outside, and assumes, hey, my brothers are with me, da 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 da. There's something about Jon's virtue, there's sort of that weird there's something odd going on between Jon's virtue and him being punished for it, right? Everyone in Game of Thrones, I should have said this first. Everyone in Game of Thrones is punished for having virtue. If you do something right, morally, then you're always punished from Robb on down. Even Robb breaking his promise, he still attempted to make right and all that good stuff. You're punished. And John is the only character, well, in a lot of ways, he's one of the only characters who has been able to be a moral agent, but not be punished, or has been absolved in some way because he was brought back to life. And I just find that interesting. I shouldn't have even said it, but you know what?
No, it was very interesting. I mean, it's okay. It's a free-flowing conversation. It's
right.
It's whatever, man.
I'm sort of in this mood, like I'm thinking I'm in a formal debate, and I'm like, honey, you're talking about Game of Thrones with your friends.
Yeah,
it's fine. It's
exactly. I've been writing an academic grant all day, so I might just be speaking in very formal language because that was the mode I was set to for about 6 hours today. So I might be the one stressing everybody out. Sorry.
Oh no, honey, no stress.
I feel like I'm probably being the least like intellectual person about it, and just kind of.
You're bringing good perspective. Listen, this is fun. We're not here to fucking turn Game of Thrones into a dissertation. we're here to talk about it in the ways that we see it and enjoy ourselves, because God knows there's so little of that on the internet.
Everything is about, it's one of those things that's very hard to like shut it off. I'm always like intimidated by like groups where we talk about things, because sometimes I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get like really flustered and I'm gonna like mess up, I'm gonna miff details. I mean, I've already miffed a few details about Game of Thrones when it comes to names, and I don't think I've fucked up bloodlines yet, but I'm probably going to.
Don't worry. I unfortunately I know more about Game of Thrones than the real world, so it's I got that on lock.
Yeah, she can fact check.
Right. Ooh. Where's my echo coming from?
Sorry, that's coming from my end because my fucking headphones disconnected.
Okay. You want to mute yourself really quick.
Don't make me mute you.
Yeah, so back to the characters. Of course, they're operating. Yeah, I mean, the reason I was really excited for the TV series was because with so many books, the characters have a very long trajectory. And your point about punishment is really, really interesting. That that's one of the things that probably, well, let's just talk about it in terms of maybe Ramsay, the rape of Sansa. Mm-hmm. The audience have sympathized with her and really, she's just had the worst trajectory of any character, right. I think. And yeah, her virtue doesn't protect her. And in Game of Thrones, being virtuous does not protect one. Even the Sparrow, who's supposed to be virtuous, is still wielding immense political and physical power with all of his followers. And he got punished too. So, it's one of those, it really does mirror the sort of life isn't fair, and it takes away the hope of a happy ending. It makes you think that a happy ending it wouldn't really suit Game of Thrones, would it? But then the question becomes, well, what does? But yeah, I thought your punishment comment was a really interesting one.
Well, I thank you. I felt so bad. Part of me feels bad for Sansa, but part of me was interested by the idea that, okay, clearly this is a young woman who's been abused and has come, always come to kind of the cusp of abuse. She's been hit, yes, but rape was always on the cusp, right? It was always threatened, but never kind of followed up on. So here's the moment when it's followed up on. Here's the moment after we think, oh, she's on an upward swing, that she really hits rock bottom. But this is, for me, that moment after Sansa is raped becomes her most powerful moment. This is the moment where Sansa realizes, okay, I'm not safe. No one can protect me. Littlefinger can't, Jon can't, my name can't, nothing can. I have to protect myself. And to me, it wasn't that moment when she lies for Littlefinger that she really comes into her own. For me, it's that moment when she's sitting in front of Theon, when Theon comes to bring her dinner, and she's sitting there, breakfast. She's sitting there already dressed and just asks why. Why didn't, why when I needed you, didn't you help me? That was Sansa truly becoming an agent, truly having some agency over pretty much all the other women in Game of Thrones, and saying, okay, now's the moment I'm going to take control of my own life. And I hate to say that it was rape that did it. It wasn't the rape. It was this thing that she probably thought wouldn't happen to her finally did happen. But let's reel it on back to those male characters. let's to segue back, and we'll make it back to Sansa before this is over. The relationship between Jon and Tyrion, I think, is really an interesting relationship that is set up for something that I think is going to happen now in 7. We see, so do you guys want to, do you want me to preface it a little bit? Do you remember anything about it, or should I talk about it a little bit?
Well, for our benefit and also anyone in the audience, why don't you do a quick summary of their interactions on the way up to the wall, and then
Jon and Tyrion meet at Winterfell. Tyrion gives Jon probably the best piece of advice anyone's ever given Jon, which is, you know, don't let people tell you that being a bastard's a bad thing. You wear it like armor and no one can ever hurt you with it. They travel to the wall together. Of course, Tyrion imparts much life advice on Jon, everything from, you know, do you really want to join up with these guys? Do you know what you're getting yourself into? To you've never even been with a girl, you should consider it. He of course saves Jon's life from people who would eventually become his friends. They have a very solid friendship really quickly. And I really appreciate their relationship because it's one of the few male relationships in Game of Thrones that ends well. There's no animosity there. There's respect. There's love seemingly between the two. And it's, to me, just an example of a really positive sort of male relationship, just generally.
Well, they're also two of my favorite, actually, I'm just, not even male, just two of my favorite characters. And I think that they should, like, honestly, I think that their relationship should maintain to be, like, should be maintained as a very good relationship. Like, it's what I think that I may be wrong on when it like larkens back to, but back in the first season when they first started talking at the wall, like that, yeah, you got to see like a very good relationship established there as two people who are relatively relatable. I mean, both of their mothers died upon birth, if I have my details correct. Both of them are, well, both of them are bastards in, like, quote, I mean, obviously, like, the word bastard doesn't hold much weight in the real world, but in Game of Thrones, it holds a lot of weight to be a bastard. Both of them come from royal families, and it seems like, they also both cut, or no, actually, never mind. I don't think I've heard, from what I've seen, I don't think there's anything about who Tyrion's father is, but it's hinted that it's probably not Tywin. I highly doubt that Tyrion's actual father is Tywin. But both of them have kind of struggled in their life because they've both been kind of, or well, Tyrion has been rejected by his family, and just Jon has been rejected by the world because no one knew who his father, well, except for Ned Stark, because, you know, Ned Stark gets let in on all the awesome things until he gets killed. Why kill Sean Bean? Why?
Because Sean Bean always has to die.
He didn't die in Oblivion, but then again, he voice acted at least like 20 characters in that game.
Well, you know, what you kind of raised too is we've touched on it, well, we've danced around it, but the role of patriarchy, and not sort of like modern day patriarchy, but actual, you know, fathers having power over their kids' lives in ways that we don't see in the West today. And with both Jon and with Tyrion, we have a situation where, you know, their lives are very much influenced by the roles that their fathers or adoptive fathers take up. And, you know, Jon he's a Snow, he's not a Stark, but he still has, you know, I think, you know, he might be of Targaryen blood, but in his values and who he is as a person, he's a Stark. You know, he's got that sort of, you know, northern honor and stuff like that. Whereas Tyrion's father obviously played a huge role him also being on the outside of what's acceptable for social, who can have power, basically, in that time and space of the story. And so, yeah, they're both sort of victims of this system where they're less free to be who they are because they're under the mantle of their father's protections until their fathers die. So.
Yeah. Also, correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't it revealed who Jon Snow's mother was as well as who his father was?
Yeah, in the series.
Yeah. Wasn't his mother Ned's sister?
Yes.
So he is also a Stark. He's both fire and ice.
Yes.
He is a Targaryen and he is a Stark.
Yep.
Which definitely makes him an interesting character because, well, Daenerys Targaryen is another Targaryen, which means I'm hoping, I'm not sure whether this will happen, but I am hoping to see an alliance between Jon Snow and Daenerys Targaryen. And then this one's a bit like, this one hasn't been like revealed, but like there's been so many people speculating that that Tyrion's father was the Mad King, who was a Targaryen, which would mean that which would mean that they would all essentially be related. But then again, that has not been confirmed, so.
Yeah, I think that the Jon Snow Daenerys thing makes a lot of sense in terms of the story of where we've left it off, because Jon Snow knows the island, he knows Westeros. He also has, the Targaryen line for the royalty, but he's a bastard, whereas Daenerys is legitimate, so she can have the throne, or she can claim the throne legitimately, but she doesn't really know anything about the people or the country because she's been gone for so long. So it makes sense from a story point of view for them to get together, I think, for them to get together. And if they got married, well, the Targaryens are known for marrying their siblings. So a half-brother is actually, kind of going a bit far afield for them.
Right? And not to mention my personal favorite, well, the Lannisters too. Hey, Joanna and Tywin were first cousins, so,
Yep.
Did you guys ever see Gallivant when it was on? It was
No.
so funny. It was basically a musical about a medieval adventure, but in part of the storyline, the princess is meant to marry her cousin, and her mom said, come on, sweetie, it's straight up. Our family tree, it's straight up. That's
no branches, it's just straight up.
Exactly.
I don't,
and that's kind of what I think of the Targaryens.
That seems a bit. That seems like a that seems like a recipe for bad genetics. I mean, we saw this in actual royal families in the real world, as we saw like just gene pools get messed up because they would marry in the family to keep the wealth in the family, and you started to see a lot of birth defects, and it like really it can cause all kinds of genetic disorders. So yeah, that a straight up family tree, that doesn't sound like.
But it smashes taboos, and Martin does a lot of that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And I listen. Now we all know, and I'm sorry I was gone for this part of the conversation, but I want to see Jon and Daenerys get married strictly from the perspective of, the two royal houses coming together, and, and two people who I think should ruling together. Obviously, of course, it makes sense for her, it makes sense for him, and I'm sure you guys have listed the best reasons. However, I don't like it because I sort of lived through Daenerys, right? And I feel like for Dany, she can earn her throne by herself through conquest. She doesn't need to even claim royal blood. If Robert Baratheon can be the king, then so can she, right? His grandmother was her great aunt. So they both descend from the same line. There's no reason why she couldn't claim the throne through conquest, but I want her to rule solely. She does not, she's not just that she deserves it, she has earned this right. We've seen, and to me, the blossoming of the story is, here's a young woman who's gone from being abused by her brother, abused by effectively the world, used as a pawn, to becoming the queen, right? There's no one in her, there's no side piece, there's no king consort, there is just her. She is the fount of all authority. Now, whether that happens or not it is what it is. Of course, I want to see them get together because it just seems like a perfect match to me. But I would prefer to see Jon marry Arya more for love than anything else. But
I mean,
that's
I was
passionate incest story. So,
but what's funny is that I wasn't, when I brought up them getting together, I didn't mean like getting married. I just kind of meant as like allies, like working together. But yeah, then Kristi kind of brought up like, yeah, Targaryens are known for marrying their siblings, so a half sibling is kind of out there,
right?
Yeah, Game of Thrones. I don't think is there a single family that's not dealing with incest?
Well, on the point of marriage, if Martin is taking his cues from history, and especially the War of the Roses, which we know he is, then I see parallels here with Henry Tudor coming, who was Henry VII, who reinvaded England and married Elizabeth of York, who was the daughter of Elizabeth Woodville and Edward IV. Yep. And she couldn't claim the throne because she was a woman, and they didn't have that in those days. So he won by conquest, and then by marrying her, he united the two lines. And so I think that there's history there that Martin might have been drawing on when he was doing out the story arcs, possibly.
I agree. And it's, a lot of individuals, including myself, have made the parallel between Daenerys and Henry Tudor. So I think that that's definitely where this idea is sort of blossoming from, is the uniting of the roses and the union of the houses. And mind you, and I know that, and I kind of know that from the fact that when you look at the family trees of the Targaryens and the Starks, they're the only two houses that haven't intermarried. This would be the first time that if Jon and Dany did get married, this would be the first time fulfilling the idea of ice and fire, that the Targaryens and the Starks were married. And the Targaryens have married outside of their house many times to many people. So I think this is, I don't like the idea of Jon as the Song of Ice and Fire. I think that their union is the Song of Ice and Fire, but that's me being, weird and poetic about it.
Well, I mean, while the Starks and Targaryens have not married, have not intermarried their houses in any way, it is pretty clear from Jon's birth that they have had affairs with each other.
Well, that would be
had an affair.
That was the first time that as far as we know, it had ever happened. Which I find kind of interesting, the House of Ice and the House of Fire coming together. But I do want to move on a little bit to, because as much as I love Jon, I would like to talk about Jaime. Jaime,
I got my ass kicked by Brienne of Tarth Lannister.
Yes. Jaime's story is an interesting one, right? To kind of recap, Jaime went from being very much Cersei's toady and very much just a man who was a preening sort of knight who knew he was never going to inherit, so didn't, so kind of lived like a man who knew he wasn't going to inherit. He just did whatever the fuck he wanted to caring about the future of his children, to caring about the future of his own honor. And I like, and I kind of want to explore his juxtaposition to Cersei, a woman who knew what the future was going to hold for her and has in some ways did everything that she could to make it happen. And a man who has always been reckless and who's never really cared about the future, finally recognizing that he's got to set down some roots and do something to ensure that his family's survival.
Yeah, I think Jamie's arc is very interesting. We sort of see him at the point where he's like the, Justin Bieber smoking weed on a plane, being a jerk with his friends. He's at the sort of the pinnacle of all of those things you initially described. And so our reactions to him is he's a spoiled brat. He's arrogant. He doesn't care about anything except himself. And he's willing to hurt people to, protect things that are important to him without real regard to the consequences. Mm-hmm. And so watching him then basically like fall all the way for, the first season, setting things up for him to get in a position to, be where he gets his ass kicked by Brienne of Tarth.
Right.
And the way that he's humiliated over and over and over again. And he ends up discovering a sympathy that we didn't see, that the sympathy that he was lacking. Basically, that made us not like him. He ends up discovering it and embracing it in his own ways, and in acting. He's one of those characters you start not liking by the end you really like. Yeah. At least for me. And that's a really difficult thing, I think, to take someone who you set up for the audience to dislike immediately, and then you reinforce that for quite a long time. And then you just pull him down. So like, yeah, he got his comeuppance.
He's so low.
But then...
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, but then he goes solo and he starts pulling himself up and he almost earns your trust.
Yeah.
And I can't think of another character who does that.
I can't either. There's some characters like Hodor, you immediately love and trust Hodor, right? Because there's no agenda behind Hodor. There's no power behind. It's just Hodor is just who he is, right? The sweet giant who's been manipulated by Bran the whole time. But Jamie, oh man, that first episode, just want to punch him in his face. But
I wanted to push him out the window.
Right?
The same window that he pushed. He pushed Bran out of.
Oh yeah. And in the books, Jamie is much more vicious, right? In the book, at the inn at the crossroads where Sansa and Joffrey, Arya, the butcher's boy Micah, and the wolves had that incident. Cersei sends Jamie out to find and kill Arya, and he looks for her for hours. God knows if he had found her, he probably would have killed her. Jamie Lannister is a piece of shit. And in the books, he's just the ultimate piece of shit. But as you continue to read, as you get in, and once you kind of get into his head, right, you get to his point of view chapters. Once you start to see his perspective, you do sort, as Kristi said, you do sort of start, and as he's humiliated and you're like, yeah, fuck you. Yeah, you lost your sword hand, you bastard. You sort of start to feel that sympathy. And I think that small aperture that you start off with for sympathy is his love of Tyrion. You see that he really loves Tyrion. He is, he's not going to abandon Tyrion. He's not going to let anything happen to Tyrion. And that, he basically instigates the War of the Five Kings because Tyrion has been captured. You see that, and you almost, because he does all this other horrible shit, you set it off to the side, but that's the small little opening that grows wider and wider as you explore his character more. And that, I think that George R.R. Martin does a great job of building on that sympathy to create a character who is now empathetic. Although this is the same guy who straight up says about Joffrey in the books, I don't give a fuck about him. He was just something I squirted into Cersei one night, and that is the direct quote. You still feel...
Joffrey is an asshole.
Well, he is, but that's his child, right? It does, everybody's got asshole kids. I can think of some parents of some YouTubers right now, all right, but who got some asshole kids. But
Hunter Avalon, Sargon of Akkad, TJ Kirk.
We could go down a long list. Well, from what we know from some sources, his parents are assholes too. But
debatably worse than him.
I won't say. I'll keep it there, but I'll let you say, baby. Jamie still, even though he's kind of got that vicious nature, he's got this, you know, he's, like I said, he's preening, you still do feel that's by the time you hit A Dance of Dragons, by the time you hit the fifth season and the sixth season of Game of Thrones, you start to feel like, I want Jamie to win. And when I saw, and you know, last point, when I saw the trailer for 7, where he's galloping away from a big fireball, I'm just like, no, my baby. It's the evolution of his character is probably, you know, his arc is probably one of the longest ones, if I'm saying that correctly. His arc is certainly the one that traverses the most ground. He goes from kind of bad guy to good guy, where everybody else sort of either enhances the character they already have or struggles with certain aspects of their character, but it's no one to me is as complex as Jaime Lannister.
I would agree with that. I think in terms of the distance that he's traveled, you know, maybe everyone has the same length of a character arc, but his goes from baddie to goodie. So it travels like the longest distance in that arc.
See, Kristi knows. Kristi knows what I'm trying to say.
Yes. Right? Yeah, and coming into the next season, you know, he's lost everything. He doesn't know yet about what's happening with Cersei. It will be very interesting to see how he reacts to that. That's going to be, I think, one of the best parts of what's coming up soon. Can't wait. And he's a person that I definitely like. When his character comes on screen, I am going to, you know, not want to blink for missing a gesture or a look or a flick of the hand or something.
Oh yeah.
I don't want to miss a single bat of his eyelashes.
Right? That look he gives Cersei at the end of 6, where she's on the throne, she's had her coronation, and he's looking, and that look that's filled with dread and anticipation, and there's just a twinkle of love and a twinkle of excitement there too. I mean, you know, Nikolai Kostas-Waldau should be applauded for his portrayal of Jaime Lannister. I think it's, you know, you could not have matched up that character with a better actor.
On that, if I can. Sorry, I was just going to say, one of the things that makes his character, that gives you the time with his character to warm to him, and also with Tyrion, is the supporting actor who plays Bran. Braun. Sorry, not Bran. Braun. I don't know the name of the actor, but Braun's character, because of his quips and his wit, and I guess he's edgy. In that world, the way that they're able to do that kind of, you know, sort of salty banter back and forth, you get to see the camaraderie, you get to see a softer side of both of those characters. And so, yeah, without the Bronn character, I think Jaime and Tyrion would both not be as emotionally connected to us as they are.
Oh, agreed. I think that Bronn brings out a different aspect. Bronn is able to hit on those things that he's able to kind of bring low these characters that are on such pedestals and have that banter and that back and forth without the worry of, you know, I'm going to have my tongue cut out.
I have to say, Bronn, like, just from the moment that he was introduced and that fight that he had for Tyrion, from that moment on, I have liked his character ever since. I could not dislike his character. His character has always been well written, and like you said, like the banter that he gives to people like Jaime, and the fact that he can bring people down from the pedestal. I mean, not to repeat everything that you said, but like, I've loved his character since the beginning. Like, since he was introduced, when he fought for Tyrion so that Tyrion could survive the trial by combat, and the reason is specifically the quip that he makes after he is told, you did not fight with honor, and then he says, but he did.
Right.
He's dead, but he fought with honor. I'm unarmored. I'm unarmored. Do you expect me to fight with honor? Like, you don't expect me to make sure that I survive?
Well, you know how Lysa is. My favorite quip from Bronn is actually from the episode prior to the one you're talking about, where they're going up to the Eyrie, and he says, and Tyrion's kind of going on about the Eyrie and saying, you know, it's impregnable. And he says, give me 20 good minutes, some climbing spice, I'll impregnate the bitch. And it's like, Bronn's character. Now, Bronn's character is different, much different in the books than it is in the series, right?
Yeah.
Bronn is, and Kristi, you want to take this over? You take this over. All right.
Yeah, well, my reflections on Bronn is, you know, a parallel character. And we talked a lot when we talked about the women, the parallel and the inversion of some elements of the same character. So Bronn is the outsider. When we came into the Stark family and the Baratheon family, the whole time we've been spent in the aristocracy. We've been trapped in formalities and rituals like salt and whatever, bread, these things that regulate their social lives and their interactions. Bronn's outside that, just like the onion, was it the onion?
So Davos.
Yeah, Davos was outside of it as well. These guys are just, you know, fighters for hire or mercenaries or smugglers. You know, they're living outside of the normal economy, and they come in and, like you said, they bring the other characters down to a much more normal level. Both of those, well, in the case of Sir Davos, he tries to adapt to that life and become part of it, whereas Bronn doesn't. Bronn stays Bronn. I mean, he has a title and he gets a castle and he gets a lady to be, you know, his wife, but he doesn't really change. He's still the same person. And so that, again, is an interesting juxtapositions of someone occupying a sort of similar place in the narrative, but inverting their trajectories.
Oh, definitely. And see, Kristi always puts things so eloquently. I feel like, use your brain, girl. God, you know, shit.
Well, I'm thinking while you guys are talking, you know, so you're helping me, give me the ideas, and then I'll just restate them.
See, what Kristi's thinking, I'm just splattering shit all over. Like, yeah, this is what I've been thinking about this for 10 damn years.
I could sit all day and listen to Kristi talk, to be honest.
Right? Like, Kristi should do this series by herself. We should just shut up and go on.
No, absolutely not. I'm really enjoying you guys hearing what you have to say. Oh, okay, big love fest. Oh, hugs.
Okay. Now that we've hugged it out, let's get back to the Song of Ice and Fire.
Let's get back some death and destruction.
Right? I think Bronn is much more, in the books, he definitely has much more of a he's much more of a cutthroat. Where in the series, we sort of have veered off from Bronn's character in the books at right around season 5, I think. Bronn does actually marry Lola Stokeworth. Bronn does end up, if I remember correctly, he kills Felice, who is Lolas's older sister's husband, in a duel, and Felice is carried off by Qyburn to become one of his experiments. And according to the World of Ice and Fire, she died screaming. That's great. Bronn definitely, for all of, you know, for him being kind of quippy and witty and in a lot of ways thoughtful, Bronn is also an adept player at the Game of Thrones. And I don't know that shines so much through in the series, but it definitely in the books, he's got, you know, a razor's edge for politics. And I think that's why Tyrion likes him so much, certainly. And I think that's why Jaime likes him so much, because although he is a commoner, he does bring that point of view to a very regimented world. He still understands the rules of their world well enough to play the game with the best of them. And that's something I appreciate about Bronn too. I love anybody who's common in the Game of Thrones, and I kind of like that in real life too. Anyone who's sort of, you know, who's not of the blood royal and is just along for the ride with the royals. I love their perspective on the matter.
Yeah, that's interesting. You know, the way that they've changed the series. I think they've made very good decisions along the way. They've found a way to both be true to the story and change the story. Which is a very hard thing to do. And Bronn is an example of that. A little bit too how is it the prostitute? I want to say Rose, but that's not it. Rosalind, yes. She too was an amalgamation of a lot of other female prostitute characters, and she ended up playing a role, you know, with Littlefinger and becoming a character that we ended up caring about as well. So I think that the showrunners and the writers have taken a lot of care and put a lot of thought into why they make the changes they do. And you can see that in a character adaptation like Bronn, because it's difficult to think what would have filled the gap of Jaime's practicing sword with his left hand in the middle of nowhere. Who would he have done that with, you know?
Yeah, and go ahead.
All the other things. Yeah, no, just like a lot of those other little moments of interactions between especially the male characters, because he's very much of the male world. It's hard to imagine the series without them, because they're so, like I said, he's so important to their characterization.
Oh yeah, and do you really, in terms of visually, in the books, it makes perfect sense that Jaime's sparring with Sir Ilan Payne. He doesn't have a tongue, so he can't say anything. But in the series, we set up Sir Ilan Payne to be such an asshole. In fact, we haven't seen Sir Ilan, I think, since season 2. So do you really want to see Jaime spar with a man with no tongue? No, you want to see Jaime have to to deal with not only, you want to see Jaime have to deal with not just the fact that he can't fight, but someone actually commenting on the fact that he can't fight, someone who's giving him the business while, giving him the business end of the sword, while giving him the business end of the business. Oh, that doesn't make any sense. Stop talking, lady.
The business end. What about the sword end of the business?
There you go. And the sword's end of the business with the Valyrian steel and the Damascus steel, and there you go.
The Damascus, the Valyrian steel. Okay.
Because it is the case that in Game of Thrones, men's moments of intimacy come more often with other men. If we think about intimacy not as being a sexual thing, but as just being a personal thing of closeness where you open up to somebody else. Yes, you had Eddard and Catelyn back at the beginning of the series, but really there's a lot of times when, it's Tyrion talking to Jaime, or Jaime talking to Bronn, or, Jon talking to another member of the Night's Watch. That's where you see actually a lot of the emotional development from the male characters.
Agreed.
I can say I'm definitely glad that they don't I'm glad that it wasn't like one of those poorly written things. Like you basically get the Duke Nukem archetypical character who's just like, I'm a badass. I don't need to talk about my feelings. Let's just go and kick some ass. I like how the characters are developed emotionally and how the men are intimate as characters, that they're intimate with each other.
Yeah, I was thinking about the scene when Jon and, I can't remember his name, all I can think of is from the Game of Thrones, he calls him Tubby Lubby. The other member of the Night's Watch, what's his name? Yes. I can't watch the Game of Thrones because then I just forget the characters' names and I start using his characters' names. But anyway, when they're talking about having sex and women and all that kind of stuff and their families and all that, those are the moments where the guys are opening up and, showing parts of themselves that to a friend, someone that they feel they can trust, that they can't do out on the training grounds. And so, I found that kind of when I realized it, it's interesting that that's where most of the emotional development really happens, is between fathers and sons.
And let me butt in for a second, Rose, because I do want to say that Kristi's point is extremely interesting. It's got my wheels turning here. Very smart point, Kristi.
You're not the only one,
right? I butt in to say that even there's an intimacy without tenderness in many scenes. So for example, the moments between Tywin and Tyrion, where there's not a tenderness there, but there is an intimacy where these two characters are opening up to each other, where Tywin is saying, yeah, I want you dead. You're a deformed son of a bitch, and you killed my wife. And Tyrion is trying to defend himself and say, listen, I'm a human being like you're a human being. That's an intimacy that isn't, a tender one, but it's certainly an intimate moment between two people who, especially for Tywin, who can't open up to anyone, right? Who has to keep this mask on of being this cold, cruel man. Here he is kind of laying it on the line for his son. I think that's quite an interesting, but I think that's quite an interesting relationship there. And I think that was a really great point, Kristi.
Another example would be Tywin and Jaime when he's skinning the deer.
Yeah.
Scene, and he's talking about what's important. and it's your legacy, it's what you leave after you die, and it's your name and your honor and all these things. And yeah, he's in the middle of butchering an animal while he's giving this talk to his son about what it means to be a member of their family. And so you have a kind of intimacy, but without tenderness. Yep. Oh, who went
Well,
where?
you know, you know, the manosphere has a word for those people. It's cock. No.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it is quite a good thing. Like, as you said, even the intimate moments without tenderness. Like you said, the whole, like, they're skinning a deer, but they're having this intimate talk about who their family, about, like, what it means to be a part of their family. It definitely makes the story much more interesting than just some dude bro, like, you need to carry on my legacy and you need to be tough.
One parallel we could perhaps think of is, you know, if we have a world like the Game of Thrones, which is highly patriarchal, male-centric, and women aren't necessarily considered equals or people that you would partner with or confide in, we can look at ancient Greece, where the idea of there are some writings that say the best relationships are between men because they're a relationship between equals. And that there's a kind of camaraderie and connection that in ancient Greece, men found with each other that they couldn't find with women because they didn't educate them or allow them to participate.
That
so
was common in both.
For failure.
Yeah, that was common in both Rome and Greece. I mean, also in ancient Rome, like before Christianity became the main religion, in both Rome and Greece, not only did you have intimate moments between men that were non-sexual, you also, like, they did not shy away from the idea that, like, men could get intimate with could get in bed with each other. Men could enjoy each other's company in a way that supposedly only men and women are supposed to do in, like, a lot of the Abrahamic religions.
Right, but that was also bound up with status. So that was why it was usually an older man with a younger man, because one had to be the receiver, one had to be the pitcher, one had to be the catcher. So, and that dominance stayed, you know, unless there was like a lot of intimacy between them. But that maybe brings us on to the topic of homosexuality, and pretty much, well, except for Yara, exclusively male homosexuality in Game of Thrones, which I would say is much less like ancient Greece or ancient Rome, and much more like today, where we have an identity of being gay. So Michel Foucault, a French philosopher, theorized that, theorized, I guess you could say, that homosexuality as an identity has only really formed after the scientific revolution. And before then, and I think a lot of historians actually have the same idea, is, you know, it was a practice, but it wasn't part of who you were. And the idea of having homosexuality as an identity is a fairly modern concept. Actually modern as in since the scientific revolution, since the sort of 1800s.
Didn't this come from the History of Sexuality by Foucault? Or the history
I think that's the work.
Or
yeah, I haven't read a lot of
Foucault. It was History of Something Related to Sex by Foucault. No, that's not an exact name. Before someone decides to be a smartass in the comments.
Right, because there are stories. I think Richard II was rumored to have had homosexual relationships, but if they didn't have the concept of gay. But anyway, getting back to it, I think, that's another thing that is interesting about the series, is the way that homosexuality exists within it, but it is also shunned in ways that we can see parallels of modern life.
Oh, definitely. You know, the relationship, obviously, you know, the relationship between Renly and Loras is the primary example of them. Everyone knows that these two are homosexual, and they, you know, and they're willing to shine it on, and they're willing not to kind of say anything to them because clearly, you know, one's the king's brother. But as it becomes more politically advantageous to out Loras, you know, Cersei takes that opportunity, and I agree that the parallel that certainly Loris, the way in which Loris and Renly are treated is much more parallel to the way to kind of the modern era and how we deal with homosexuality, or how it's been dealt with, than it is like how ancient people dealt with homosexuality. And kind of going back to that, certainly, society, we all know that from society to society, homosexuality was dealt with kind of differently. I think, if from what I know, the ancient Egyptians were sort of against it and shunned it. But certainly the Romans under the Republic and the Greeks were a lot more open about it. Obviously, it was a relationship of domination, and that person who was taking the D was the woman in that regard. They were considered to be the submissive in that regard. But in Game of Thrones, there isn't that. People will joke like, which one is the woman? But that you don't, even with Cersei using Loris's homosexuality against him, one, you don't get the sense that it's an identity for Loris. Loris is just Loris. And two, you don't get the sense that anyone is against. There's no, like, there might be that you only get the religious sort of the injection of it being taboo from the religious perspective once the High Sparrow takes power. But up until that moment, you don't really get a sense that the religion, that the faith of the Seven gives a damn about, who's having sex with who.
Well, I'm going to pull you up on that a little bit. 2 points. First, I have to get one out of my head, otherwise I'll forget it. There's this great scene with Diana Riggs when it's the woman from the Martell woman who runs the house, Lady
Illyria.
No, Illyria, is that it? Olivia?
Yeah, Illyria Sand.
Yes, and she's talking with Tywin about the wedding, and she's joking with him about being gay, and says that every boy goes gay for a little while or something. And again, on the Game of Thrones, because he doesn't call her Diana Riggs, he calls her Maggie Smith. And he's like, that's right, Maggie Smith, you tell him. So I think Tywin was disproving of it. I think there's two kind of existence. There was in the brothels where anything goes, sort of an acceptance of sexual preferences. And then I think outside, especially in the higher societies, I mean, when God, I'm forgetting all the characters' name too. The Marjorie comes in and interrupts them. They're pretty much covering up their relationship. So, and they flirt sort of more on the side. And so I would say socially, it's not acceptable to be out, but the embracing of it, I think is a bit more modern. So maybe I'm over egging on how modern the identity is. But when I see characters kind of embracing their sexuality, that to me seems far more modern than practices, in the past. Oh no,
I agree. I agree with you in that. I agree with you in that regard. I think that in the juxtaposition between Oberyn and Illyria, who are open about their sexuality, who are open about who they are and what their preferences are, not just inside of the brothels, but outside of the brothels as well. And they have that ability because they are, of the blood royal. Of course, Oberyn is the Prince of Dorne, and he's, a great fighter, so no one's going to challenge him. I think that those two are much more modern, right? I think that as an audience member, I identify with them more because they are seemingly more like us, where, and you're right. I think I'm thinking of it from Littlefinger's perspective. I'm living in the fucking brothel, I'm living in the brothel, but
don't live in the brothel.
Right.
I don't know. The brothel sounds like a fun place to live.
Oh, for the first 2 hours, and then it'll just get repetitive.
Right.
There is no such thing as too much sex. That is blasphemy, Kristi.
Oh, that's because you're in your you're getting on 20s, and I'm getting on 50. So
turned 19 a couple months ago, actually.
Oh my God, you're 19.
Different phases in life.
Baby.
Just turned 19 in April.
Baby. Oh, I'm turning 27 in October.
Here I am with two old ladies in the chat.
Yep, exactly.
Right.
Well, no, she's still very young, and I'm young at heart.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I find it funny. Kristi's actually older than my mother. I think we actually established that the first time I ever talked to Kristi.
Well,
Yeah, I guess I got to get used to that more and more the older I get.
Well, my mama is older than all of us, all right, and so she's the wisest one here. No, she just had her 65th birthday yesterday, so.
Wow, she's older than my grandmother.
What, baby?
My grandmother just turned 60 like a couple of weeks ago.
Wow.
On the 14th of June.
My mom is barely older than your mom. I'll just say that. I don't want to dox her.
We getting into dangerous territory.
Yeah, don't give out personal information on the internet.
Yeah, shh, everybody.
But
all right?
yeah,
don't
back
tell
to,
them when my birthday is.
Getting back to gay love.
Yeah, gay love, guys, and love for every human.
Gay love is best love.
Right? There is that tension in society. And I know part of the reason I feel like I feel like I'm a northerner, right? I don't give a shit about anything that's going on except the White Walkers. So I may pave over some of the subtleties of the South. But yeah, I agree with Kristi's point that in the North, I mean, not in the North, I agree with Kristi's point that there is a social taboo that extends outside of the faith of the seven, that does put the kibosh on being open about one's sexuality.
Which was the middle brother? And I'm sorry, the younger brother, Renly Baratheon.
Renly, yeah. I
think he would have been out. I mean, in the books, I was looking for it in the TV show, but in the books, doesn't he have his Kingsguard all have like colors of the rainbow?
Yeah, they call him the Rainbow Guard.
Yeah, I mean, that's not subtle.
Right? No, it isn't. And I think, yeah, had he won the throne and had a baby with Marjorie, then he would have just been like, I'm fucking around with fucking Loras. That's the way we're doing it, guys. But it's interesting that only if you are in the position of being like a king, like the king or a prince, that you have the right to sort of be open about your sexuality. I mean, and speaking of, a very taboo, we kind of talked about it earlier. We touched on it earlier in terms of the Targaryens' incest. That is a form of sexuality that, regardless was shunned completely, even though the royal house, who had dragons, and dragons, solve all problems according to Littlefinger, still had to face dealing with the faith and dealing with a society that was totally against incest. And that was that for them was an ancient cultural practice that, was passed down generationally from the time of the earliest Valyrians. But even people who are seemingly not I don't want to say seemingly exceptional, but I'm going to have to go with that. Even they had to bow to the whims of society and not intermarry with each other at times because it was so taboo. So I've gone off topic, but I think you guys know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I agree. A lot of good points. So yeah, any other important? There's so many male characters.
Oh God. We talked a little about Tyrion. Is there any? Can you guys think of any? I think we'll kind of end it on Tyrion unless there's a character you guys really, really, really want to talk about that's not Tyrion.
Well, just to drop his name, like Lord Friendzone.
Oh, Jorah Mormont. That yes, Lord Friendzone. I love it. Jorah is interesting in that it's kind of clear to me that Jorah only really values women for their appearance. In the books, it's really clear, like he married his first wife, who may have been Valyrian, because of the way she looked. And at first he loves Daenerys because of the way that she looks. And as he grows as a person, you see that he starts to love Daenerys for who she is. But Jorah really starts off as a guy who's kind of a bit dude bro about it. He doesn't care about you as a person. He cares about you as an object.
I think his character is interesting because as I was thinking while you were talking, one thing that occurred to me was that he seems almost like the troubadour. To me, he seems to put women on a pedestal. So he'll fall for them and try to win them over. But then he also, like with Daenerys too, he very much puts her up on a pedestal.
Oh, yeah.
So, and you know, in the Middle Ages, or the time of the War of the Roses, you did have troubadours who would fall in love with a woman who was outside of his station and just sort of pine for her romantically and never get to do anything because she was too high for him.
Right.
And that he seems to take up that position in the story for me.
Oh, yeah. You know, Jorah is a man. I mean, and Jorah, I think in a lot of ways, you know, to kind of piggyback on your point, Jorah is like the troubadour's troubadour in that he actually gets to marry one of these women who's above his station, and it ends exactly the way you think it does. You know, that's the whole reason he ends up kind of banished in the first place, is because he's trying to pay him off. He's trying to keep his wife happy and living in the lap of luxury. But he's not of a major house or anything. He doesn't have that sort of wealth. So he ends up having to sell these slaves, sell these individuals into slavery to try to get some money. And, you know, that's how he kind of ends up banished in Essos. So, Jorah achieves the troubadour's dream, but it ends up being quite hollow.
Yeah, agreed. And then he repeats the pattern with Daenerys, I think, in terms of, like you said, you know, falling in love with someone for her looks and then sort of pining for someone who is above his station. And even when she sends him off, he just won't stay away. You know, he keeps coming back like a sad dog going, no, I don't want to go outside. I want to come into the house and be by you. So, yeah, I think he's, again, looking back on it, how the characters have changed over time and their roles in the stories, I don't know how much of this is pre-planned, how much of it is sort of along the way. You know, it would be interesting to hear about Martin's writing process. You know, to what extent does he really play things out, or how much is he willing to change a story if he feels like it's going in the wrong direction and another idea would be really much better and more interesting. And so I haven't listened to a lot of interviews with him talking about his craft, but I would be interested to hear an analysis of how this book was written.
Agreed. So would I. I think that that would almost probably be as fascinating as the series in and of itself. That he, you know, just to see, I only know little tidbits and pieces. You know, he uses DOS, for example, to actually physically write the stories. Because he uses so many words that don't exist that he doesn't want spell check fucking with him. And I'm considering doing that myself. I know that he uses a lot of Post-its, but that's pretty much all I know about his process. I haven't actually seen him talk a lot about how how this all comes to fruition. I'm sure it's out there. I just haven't taken the time to look, but I would be quite interested in how he deals with a story going kind of, you know, have any of the storylines gone left and he has to try to like reel them back in or what have you. That would certainly be interesting. Kristi's on it, guys. Like I'm not, you know, Kristi's just on it. Love her.
Well, it's in contrast to Stephen Moffat. We just did a hangout with my patrons about H. Bomber Guy's Sherlock is garbage and here's why. Mm-hmm. And the biggest problem with Moffat running a TV series is that he has an initial good idea and he'll throw things into the plot that he could pick up on later. Now, I remember Joss Whedon saying when he was writing Firefly that he put in that, like, the Blue China Company in there from the beginning. He didn't know exactly what role they were going to play, but he wanted to be able to set something up to tie into a later plot development when it occurred to him. That's smart writing. That's really smart writing. And so with Martin, like I said, you know, hearing how he planned those things out and what kind of resolutions he was going for, to me, would contrast him with someone like Moffat, who seems to be just focused on how awesome the character is and showing you how awesome the character is, not through the story, but by telling you over and over again. And that's really freaking boring, as H. Bomber Guy pointed out. And Martin is completely the opposite on that. You know, you feel there's a command. When you look back at the work, you feel like it's been leading somewhere. Even while you're turning the pages, you don't know where it's going. And for me as a writer, academically, because you deal with, a lot of concepts and terms and theories and ideas, the most important thing you can do as a writer is be confident about guiding your reader exactly where you want them to go. But to do that, you have to know where you want to go. And once you know where you want to go, you have to be able to communicate that to a person who's never walked that path before. And so a good writer is someone who can very confidently take their reader to a destination. And Martin does that in a way Moffat doesn't. So those are my thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, definitely. See, Kristi, well, let me tell y'all what Kristi brings. Kristi brings that she's the one who's taking us on the journey, right? I'm just a couple of pit stops along the way, all right? Me and Rose are just like, hey, let's go over here, guys. And Kristi's like, yeah, but we have a definite journey we're taking, guys. That's
I
why
think it's more like you guys are putting flowers, you're planting seeds, right? And then I go, hey guys, step back, look at this arrangement you've made.
Kristi's that person that if we were playing Dungeons and Dragons, she'd keep trying to push the story along, and I'd keep trying to do everything on the side.
Right,
yes.
And that is why Mama doesn't play Dungeons and Dragons. But we're gonna come all the way back to the Golden Son, the person that I think that everybody in the Song of Ice and Fire just loves, no matter whether you're a book reader, show watcher. If you're into this, you absolutely love this character, Mr. Tyrion Lannister. So I think we are going to talk about Tyrion, and then we're all going to go our separate ways and probably cry.
Tyrion 2020.
Right. Let's talk about Tyrion. Now I will start off by saying this. Tyrion Lannister is probably the most interesting. Hold on a second.
Hold on a second. Oh, okay. Well, I'll talk then really quickly because I hate dead air. Tyrion, definitely the most fascinating character. And, for me, for women, Arya is the one I have a soft spot for. But definitely when it comes to the male characters, it's Tyrion. And it's because he, in a world that's all about bashing heads, and his ability to navigate out of thorny situations, I think, takes us on a journey with him that we don't really take with other characters because of his marginality, because of the way that he is, accused of murdering or trying to murder Bran in his bed. He is vilified from the start. And so he makes us laugh. I think that's the most important thing, really, to warming up to somebody. If they make you laugh, then you'll tolerate a bit more bullshit than you will with people who won't make you laugh. And Tyrion, because he makes us laugh, we empathize with him, and then we see him go through just problem after problem after problem, and getting by on his wits and his cleverness, and somehow always coming out, alive, which is winning in the Game of Thrones.
Definitely a clever one. I actually mentioned earlier that he seems to be able to weasel his way out of any trouble. He is definitely charismatic. Like there is no doubt to that. The way that I mean, considering the fact that he's someone who's pretty vilified by specific people, like he's kind of not allowed to have the power that like you would expect someone in his position to have. He is not given any of it. He kind of has to work for it. He has to, but because he's not a big guy, he's not strong. He isn't someone who can bash. He's not someone who can bash your head in. He's someone who has to find some way to circumvent violence in order to succeed, in order just to survive, not even just to succeed, but to not die. He has to, like, we see it again and again in situations where you would expect him to die, or you would expect someone to like kill him, but he manages to talk his way out of it. He manages to find some way to convince somebody to help him out, and that is always a very like that makes him a much more interesting character than someone who learned to fight. Is someone who learned to avoid fighting and someone who learned how to circumnavigate fighting or circumnavigate.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, someone who learned to circumnavigate fighting in areas, in positions where fighting seems inevitable. When fighting seems inevitable, Tyrion finds his way out of it. He finds some way. He finds some weakness. He finds some weakness, or not even necessarily a weakness, but he finds something that he can play on to convince someone to not kill him or to convince someone to even help him. And then he also does have he has on quite a few occasions managed to have Lannister money at his back, which managed to help him get through it. Like with, was it Bronn? I think he basically, the Lionel Lannister always pays their debts. He would use that, and he'd always have gold backing him up. So if he promised to pay someone, he didn't even have to like shirk it or find some way to get around paying them, which probably made things a bit easier, but still, I don't think anyone could talk their way around a fight better than Tyrion.
Yeah, he also has an interesting arc because he starts out not really caring about anything too, in the same way Jaime did, but for very different reasons. He doesn't care because he's excluded. So he's very hedonistic. He's very well. He's well read, and he sees that a lot of the people around him can't keep up with him, intellectually. So he's got an air of arrogance about him. And yet we get to know him, and he ends up being the character who's the most quotable. I mean, I drink and I know things. Come on, that was made for a T-shirt.
Yeah.
I am the god of tits.
He drinks almost as much as me. Not quite there, but almost there. For someone who's a third my size, that's impressive.
Yeah, and so the fact that he ends up being this conciliary, this advisor, this hand of the king wherever he goes, speaks to the kind of depth of character that Martin gave him, and then put him in the situations where, again, I think I'm trying to think of the comedy from the Game of Thrones, and usually, Bronn I associate with it, and Tyrion as well. The times I laugh at the show as opposed to recoil in horror and turn my head away because they're about to burn a child. It's Tyrion who brings the levity in very different scenes. And so his character is probably the most fascinating character, I think, in a lot of fiction. I won't say of all of fiction, but in a lot of fiction. So, Lady Cole, you were gone for a bit, but now are you back? No, she's still on mute. Where did she go? She left us in a hangout, and we can't turn it off.
Yeah, and I ran out of shit to say. We're both out of shit to say.
I guess we can always come back with another male character. So when you first started watching the series, what was your take on, who's the guy who gets tortured? Why am I forgetting everybody's name tonight?
Oh, I'm always forgetting everybody's name.
Theon.
Theon.
Theon's character. Yeah. What's your take on Theon?
I know that he now no longer has genitals, or no longer has male genitals, or he's a eunuch. That's the point that I'm trying to make.
Right.
Yeah,
well,
that's
from a patriarchal lens, looking at the story that way.
Yeah, that's the guy who got his that's the guy who got tortured by Ramsay Bolton, right?
Right. So he was a ward of Eddard Stark because he was ransom for the behavior of his father. So he's another sort of child whose life was completely determined by a decision that was made by his father, and grew up with the Starks and seemed to side with them. But then, of course, when the war started, he went back ostensibly to get their help to help the Starks from the Iron Island that he basically went home and tried to be one of them and tried to get his own back on the Starks. So his character arc too, you know, Catelyn Stark never trusted him. Always thought he was a little bit off, and turns out she was right. But what he goes through in terms of the torture, like literal, you know, sort of torture that we have to endure with him, at least sitting through the visuals, is
I mean, they
worse than anyone. I mean, I know Sansa gets hurt, and obviously she's sexually assaulted.
Yeah.
But he is as well, you know. So there are
Well,
again
I mean,
two characters who have similar. He's mutilated. He's mutilated.
I was going to say. I was going to say that his mutilation, I mean, that has to be at least on par with sexual assault, especially because of where the mutilation is. The mutilation is literally of a sexual part.
I will definitely agree with that. Yeah, so he's got it really worse than anybody else. Even Jaime losing his hand, he can cope with his left hand.
Jaime was forced into being left-handed. I mean, I was forced into being left-handed, but that's by my brain and not by the fact that I'm missing a hand, because I'm not missing a hand.
Yeah, I mean, he was kept in dog cages. He was basically completely psychologically broken down, and turned into a creature, Reek, and then even when he was attempted to be rescued, he was so afraid of his abuser, which is an interesting parallel, you could say, with domestic abuse. Why don't people leave? Why don't people leave when they're given a chance? And you could see, at least I could from the scene, that he was so terrified of what might happen to him if Ramsay caught him, that he wasn't even going to risk trying to free himself. And that speaks, I think, very profoundly to the nature of abuse. And that's something that I don't think a lot of people have talked about the show.
No, but you don't get it. It's Theron's fault. I'm also, like, I'm joking. I mean, nobody. Yeah. I don't think anybody in their right mind would say that it's Theron's fault. Just like nobody in their right mind would say that it's the abused person's fault that they continued to get abused.
Yeah, and so he has to dig deep, just like Jaime does in his arc, to pull himself out of his setbacks, right? But he has a far more profound and deep psychological and physical trauma. So when we're seeing him near the end of the recent seasons, when his sister Yara is trying to, pull him out of it, and why he's so depressed, I think most of us looking back at that would be like, I'm surprised he's not got PTSD in his flashbacks, but that probably wouldn't really help with the story. So. Yeah,
I mean, I was going to say, like, it had to be pretty brutal as, like, his sister to, like, basically receive a package that has your brother's genitals in it. I mean, that does not sound pleasant in any way to, like, know. It's not even like seeing someone's genitals you don't know, like, knowing, like, being told that these are your brothers, that your brother's basically been mutilated as a person.
Okay, I see Lady Cole's got to go. Can you come on and end the hangout? Otherwise, we're trapped here.
Sure, I'm sorry, guys. I just had something come up. I really got to handle this.
No, it's okay.
It's been amazing talking to you guys. We'll certainly try to do this again as soon as possible. I want to definitely get one in after the season started.
Yes, sign me up.
All right, I definitely will. All right, guys, it's been fun. I've been joined by American Anarchist and the lovely and illustrious Miss Kristi Winters. Please go to their channel, subscribe, do all that good shit. Enjoy their content as much as I do. I will see you guys as soon as I possibly can. I'm sorry I had to end so abruptly. Good night, everybody, or good morning, or good afternoon, whichever one suits you.
Good day.
Good day. There you go. Bye.
Bye.